Hello all, in this session we will learn how you can think of actually share your dashboards or how to deploy your Ploty visualization. Again, in general, while sharing the dashboards, you can always think of using one of the amazing modules often known as Dash. Again, Dash itself created by Ploty just to create the interactive web application. Again, Dash is written on top of the Flask. For those of you who know what the Flask is, so Flask is typically a web framework or a Python module that lets you develop the web application very easily. So Dash itself is built on top of Flask. There is something known as Ploty.js. It means Ploty JavaScript. Again, it is typically a charting library which includes more than 40 chart types, some crazy 3-dimension charts, some statistical graphs, something known as some SVG maps as well. So it is built on top of Flask, Ploty.js, along with it is also built on top of React.js. So internally Dash using all these 3 cores while deploying all the things. Again, for those of you who don't know React.js, so if you want to think it bluntly, it is typically a JavaScript library that is used for building a user interfaces, especially for the single page application. If we have to build a user interface, it's always good to go with a React. It's always good to go with this. So while sharing your Ploty dashboards, what you need is, you need your Dash package and some internal components of Dash package as well. The first is my HTML component of Dash. The second is my core component of Dash. So in general, what we need is, we need 3 things. We need Dash HTML component and Dash core component, so that at the end of the day, we can share the Ploty visualization that we have. Again, first and foremost, you have to install this Dash. So I can say as pip install Dash. Okay. Again, as we have installed it, so I'm not going to execute this cell. So let's comment it out. Now let's import the Dash package that we have. So I will say import Dash. Then let's import something known as, again, very first let me execute this line of code. Okay. Then what I say is, I can say, okay, import something known as dash underscore. So I will say underscore. Let's press tab over there. Look at this. The first is my something known as HTML components. Let's create its shortcut. Let's say HTML. Then we have to import something else, which is my dash underscore, okay, core components. Let's create its alias, let's say as TCC. Let me execute this line of code. So I will say Alt plus enter. Sounds good. Again, these are just the error. Don't worry. These are just the error. You can think of ignoring that. That's it. Now, first and foremost, what I need to do is, I need to create a Flask application. So in order to create a Flask application using this Dash, I can think of calling something known as a function. Which is my Dash function. Look at this. That's all about the signature of this function. So what it does is, internally, it is just a framework for building a web applications. So let's store this in, let's say in app. Let me just execute this line of code. Sounds okay. Okay. Till now, what we have done is, we have created, let's say, a Flask application. Imagine this is application. Now what we have to do is, we have to set the layout of this application, how exactly this application looks like. Again, using just this one line of code, we have created a Flask application. If you want to think it bluntly, we have just created a application or a Flask application. Now I have to set the layout. Now, in order to set the layout, you can think of something known as, again, for those of you who know, you can think of playing with something known as a HTML. So inside this HTML, we have something known as div. Again, it is one of the tags. For those of you who doesn't know, you can think like this as, let's say I have to create something. Let's say I have to create some menu. So in order to create menu, I can think of leveraging the HTML. So while calling this div, what I say is, I can say whatever the graph, it means whatever the, let's say whatever pie chart you have, let's map this pie chart on top of the application you have. That's what I'm actually saying. Now, once I map this pie chart on top of the application we have, then I will say, okay, run the server of the application you have. I will say, run server of this application you have. Now, let's try to code it up. So, whatever app you have, first and foremost, what I need is, I need to set the layout. So, I can say as app.layout. Now, using HTML, it means using a dash HTML component. I can think of something known as a div. It's a div. It's a function. Now inside this, look at this. These are all the custom parameters that you can play with that, depending upon the problem statement, depending upon the circumstances. So I can say as okay, using DCC, which is one of my core component of Dash. Let's call something known as a graph. Inside this graph, we have something. If I'm not wrong, I think we have figure. So in this figure, we have to mention our figure. Again, for those of you who are getting confused, let me show that. The moment I press Shift plus Tab over there, let me show that where we have figure. Look at this. It is saying, okay, figure equals to undefined. It means it is waiting for us just to mention some figure. Let me show that. Let me show that. Okay. So, okay, it is saying that, okay, figure, look at this figure. So it receives a Ploty figure object. It receives a Ploty figure object. It means it receives a Ploty type of visualization. So what this figure stores, as we have learned that, or as we have updated the layout on top of the figure, it means this is the figure that we have. Because the moment I say that, let me show that. The moment I say that fig.show, this is the figure that we have, I will say, okay, just pass this figure in this graph function. Again, very first, let's provide all the right basis. So I will say, okay, let's mention this one. Now, whatever layout of the application you have, let's run the server of the application. I can say app.run server. Now here I can say as okay, if there is any error, let's mention debug equals to 2 so that you can end up getting all the error and you can debug that. Again, you can think of one more interesting parameter. If I'm not wrong, I think use underscore something. Let me cross check that. Again, it is showing that, okay, look at this. These are all the by default values. It means, again, here we have a host value. It means what is a host IP in order to serve the application. So we have an interesting parameter. If I'm not wrong, I think, let's try to set that use underscore reloader. And let's try to set it as false. I think by default it is true. So again, the goal behind this is we have to turn up the reloader if we are working inside a jupyternotebook. That's a rule of thumb. So the moment I will execute this line of code, look at this. What is saying? It is saying that the Dash application you have, it is running on this following address. Now the moment I click on this, look at this. This is saying that, okay, this is a Dash application. It gets loaded over here. And this is a simple pie chart you have, what you have created. Now, this pie chart is right now exactly in the form of application. Now look at this. There is a symbol as star over there. So if you want to cancel that, what you can say, okay, let's interrupt the kernel we have. Okay. Now, the Dash application that you have, this will run on my local host. It means on my local machine. It means you can only access them on your machine. So to share a Dash application, you need to deploy it to a server that you have. You need to deploy it. So my recommendation is, if you want to deploy it, considering the security and privacy, you can think of using a very amazing thing, which is my Dash Enterprise. It's always good to go with it because this is something that is used extensively in the real world. If you want to deploy it, considering security, privacy, and a lot of other things, you can think of using Dash Enterprise. So that's all about this session. In the upcoming module, we will learn some of the very interesting plots that are often used in the real world. So that's all about it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Keep learning, keep growing, keep practicing.